into a downward spiral of hypochondria. His stomach acid, as he claimed to anyone who would listen, was potent enough to start a stalled jeep. In a desperate bid to avoid the Admiral's legendary scrutiny, Binghamton conceived a plan born of pure, unadulterated cowardice. He would fake a terminal illness. If I am incapacitated, I cannot be held responsible for the state of this base, Binghamton reasoned, clutching a bottle of indigestion pills as if they were holy relics. The Admiral cannot court-martial a dying man. He summoned McHale to his sickbed. He hated doing it, but the logic was twistedly brilliant. If he appointed McHale as acting base commander, the Admiral would be so horrified by McHale's lack of discipline that he would focus his fury on the commander, leaving Binghamton to recover in the grace of the hospital. Safe from the fallout, McHale entered the office, the scent of salt and diesel clinging to him like a second skin. He looked at the captain, who was currently draped over his chair like a dying swan, groaning with practiced theatricality. "You look terrible, Captain," McHale said, though there was a twinkle of suspicion in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. "I'm a very sick man, Quentin." Binghamton groaned, clutching his stomach. "The medics, they don't know what it is. Rare tropical fever. My blood pressure is off the charts. I need you to take command. You and Parker, you're the saltwater skippers. I need to hold this place together until well, if I don't make it." Ensign Charles Parker, standing behind McHale, looked as if he'd just been told he was being sent to the front lines with nothing but a slingshot. "Me, sir? Acting executive officer?" I'll do my best, sir. I'll run a tight ship. I'll memorize the manual by dawn." As McHale and Parker left to take over the administration, McHale caught Evelyn's eye across the compound. For a brief moment, the war vanished. The tension of the upcoming inspection, the absurdity of Binghamton's act, and the oppressive heat of the day all faded into the background. "Careful, Commander," she said softly as they passed near the dispensary. "Power is a heavy burden, especially when it's handed to you by a man who wants to see you fail. Only if you take it seriously, Evelyn. But maybe, while I'm in charge, I can find a way to get those garter belts your girls are crying for. A little commander's discretion, you might call it." Evelyn laughed, a bright, clear sound that McHale decided was worth more than any medal the Navy could ever bestow. In that moment, the Pacific didn't feel like a graveyard. It felt like a playground. Chapter 3: The Sultan of Marami and the Silk Trap. The atmosphere of Taratupa shifted overnight from a military outpost to a surreal royal court with the arrival of the Sultan of Marami and his 3 daughters. The Sultan, a man of immense dignity and hidden humor, had been rescued by the PT-73 after his own plane suffered engine trouble. "Wowie, wow, wow," Parker whispered as the 3 princesses stepped onto the dock. They were visions of elegance, draped in silks that shimmered like fish scales, their presence an exotic contrast to the olive drab of the base. But for the Sultan, the trip was more than a diplomatic necessity. He was looking for allies against the encroaching enemy, yes, but he was also a father guarding the precious hearts of his daughters. Princess Siri, the eldest and most spirited, found herself fascinated by the bumbling but earnest Ensign Parker. There was something in his clumsy attempts at protocol and his genuine fear of doing the wrong thing that spoke of a soul untainted by the cynicism of war. McHale, ever the host, organized a dinner that Binghamton, now miraculously recovering to reclaim the spotlight, insisted on overseeing. "I want an impression made," Binghamton shouted at the 73 crew, who were currently trying to polish the base's silverware with questionable rags. 100% order. No good old boy routines. We are representing the United States of America. But the crew had other ideas. Under the cover of the Sultan's visit, a romance was blooming in the shadows of the palm trees. Parker and Siri met in secret near the lagoon, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the sound of distant surf. "In my country," Siri said, her voice like music, "a man's worth is not measured by the bars on his shoulders, but by the kindness in his eyes and the courage in his heart. You, Charles Parker, are a king among men, even if you do trip over your own feet." Parker felt 10 feet tall, despite his knees shaking. I just try to do what's right, Your Highness, even if I usually end up doing it backward and setting something on fire. Meanwhile, McHale and Evelyn shared a quiet moment on the bridge of the 73. The ship swayed gently in the tide, a dark sentinel in the moonlight. Do you ever think about after? Evelyn asked, leaning against the rail, her shoulder brushing his. After the guns go quiet, and we aren't just numbers in a ledger. McHale looked out toward the dark horizon, where the sea met the sky. Every day, I see a little house by the sea. No uniforms. No captains yelling about garter belts. Just the sound of the waves and someone to share the silence with. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the cold metal rail. The touch was electric, a silent vow amidst the uncertainty of the Pacific. But the peace was short-lived. Binghamton's jealousy was festering, and he was already plotting his next move to dismantle the legend of PT-73. Chapter 4. The Laughing Gas Gambit. The comedy of errors reached its peak when Binghamton, fueled by a renewed hatred for the 73 crew's popularity with the Sultan, decided to convene a fitness board to have Parker drummed out of the Navy. He was convinced that the ensign was the weak link, the structural flaw he could use to shatter McHale's leadership once and for all. The crew, desperate to save their friend, turned to a peculiar weapon. Nitrous oxide laughing gas, procured under dubious circumstances from the dental clinic by the ever-resourceful Gruber. If we can get Binghamton in a good mood, McHale explained to the gathered crew in the hull of the 73, he'll sign anything. He'll be so giddy, he might even give us a week's leave in Sydney. We just need to make sure he's elevated. The plan was executed with military precision. They rigged a tank to the captain's office window, pumping the sweet, numbing gas into the room just as the fitness board was set to begin. The result was a scene of pure, unadulterated madness. Binghamton, usually a pillar of repressed rage and bureaucratic stiffness, began to giggle. The giggle turned into a titter, and then he began to roar with laughter, his face turning a joyous shade of pink. He embraced Parker, calling him Chucky Wacky and the most luminous star in the naval firmament. I love you all, Binghamton shouted, leaning precariously out the window and waving at the confused sailors below. Give everyone a promotion. Give the garter belts to the seagulls. Let's have a parade for the coconuts. Evelyn, watching from the clinic window, shook her head in amusement and disbelief. She saw McHale standing by the pump, his face lit with a mischievous, boyish grin. He was a man who fought the darkness of war with the light of laughter, and she loved him all the more for it. But the laughter died when Admiral Shoemaker arrived unexpectedly for the hearing. The Admiral found Binghamton dancing a jig on his desk, and Parker trying to explain the nomenclature of the 50 caliber machine gun while blindfolded, urged on by a hooting captain. Just then, a real air raid siren wailed. The Japanese were near. The base went into a frenzy. Parker, still partially blindfolded and fueled by the remnants of the gas, and a desperate, primal need to prove his worth, stumbled to a deck gun on the 73, in a feat that defied all logic, physics, and military training. He fired a single-handed burst into the smoke-filled sky. A Japanese bomber, trailing a plume of black smoke, plummeted into the sea. Magnificent, Admiral Shoemaker proclaimed, ignoring the half-naked nurses running for cover and the still-giggling captain. Ensign Parker is a hero. He stands laughing in the face of death. He is the spirit of the Navy. Parker, however, had a different request. Permission to faint, sir. Chapter 5. The Legend of Sydney and the Mark of the Heart. As the war effort moved to New Caledonia, the legend of Sydney the Alligator was born. In the humid bayous surrounding the new base, the crew of the 73 found a mascot that was as unpredictable and dangerous as the sea itself. Binghamton, still smarting from the Admiral's praise of Parker and desperate to reclaim his authority, tried to frame the crew for the theft of a $900 payroll. He dropped his wallet near their camp, waiting like a spider for them to take the bait. But it was Sydney who found the wallet. The alligator, who had developed a peculiar penchant for Parker's mother's peanut butter sandwiches, became the unwitting custodian of the evidence. Sydney ate the captain, Parker screamed when he saw the alligator lounging near the lagoon with Binghamton's ID card protruding from its jaws. The trial that followed was a masterpiece of legal absurdity. Parker, acting as his own